Hello everybody and welcome to the English legal system for the SQE. In this video we are going to take an introduction to the subject. We're going to basically explore what the specification requires of you, and we will then think about what the scope of this series of lessons is going to look like, talk about some of the videos that you are going to see in the future. Now, so this is fundamentally the first lesson in a series on the subject of the legal system for the SQE. If you are somebody who is new to law, generally you come from a non-law background, then I would probably recommend you starting by looking at the English legal system series first before diving into all of the other legal topics, because this will provide you not only with a basic understanding of the structure of the legal system that we have in England and Wales, but it will also give you a better understanding of the nature of law from a practical perspective as well as from a more theoretical perspective, something that I'm very keen to imbue in these videos. Like I said, what we'll do in this video is essentially examine the specification and outline the scope of this series. So, the English legal system, or the legal system course, is one of three parts of the specification that concerns the legal system of England and Wales and sources of law, constitutional and administrative law, and legal services. Now, just like how a number of textbooks delineate these into three separate topics, I'm doing exactly the same here. Essentially, these three topics form part of one group of topics in the specification, but fundamentally they are quite different in terms of the kind of things that we are going to study. So we will explore the legal system separately to constitutional and administrative law and EU law, and we'll study these two separately, of course, to legal services, which is, of course, its own series of videos. And so, fundamentally, the specification requires all candidates taking an examination of all of these different subjects to apply relevant core legal principles and rules appropriately and effectively at the level of a competent, newly qualified solicitor in practice to realistic, client-based and ethical problems and situations in the following areas. And then we have the following areas listed. Fundamentally, then, as I've mentioned in other videos on the other introduction videos looking at the SQE specification, there is a difference between the SQE and the LPC in that the LPC standard of what qualifies as a pass rate essentially is slightly lower than that of the SQE. The standard for the LPC was a newly qualified trainee solicitor, whereas this is, of course, a newly qualified solicitor in practice. So the standard is slightly higher. Not only is there a lot of information you have to basically know, but you have to know it to a higher standard, which just bear that in mind when you're thinking about your studies. So, this video is going to, or at least this series is going to be delineated into four major substantive topics. In each of these four major substantive topics, we are going to take about 5 to 10 videos each in them. The first will be very, very introductory. We will talk about the nature of law as a general idea, what actually is law. We'll talk about what a legal system is. We'll talk about, very briefly, at the very least, the history of the English legal system. Bearing in mind, of course, that if you are somebody who wants to explore the history of the English legal system in more detail, we have a series of those videos for you already, but obviously from a non-SQE perspective, that's just a sort of general history of English law series of videos that I did last year. Now, we'll also talk about the nature of law, and we'll talk about the idea of legal theory as well. We'll talk about what law is from a theoretical perspective, not necessarily things that you need to have an understanding of that you will be tested in your exams, in your SQE exams. You won't get a question, for example, on positivism and natural law and legal realism, but it's at least very important for you to just have a basic theoretical understanding of the kinds of things that people were saying and the kinds of things that people debate when they think about law, and when they think about what law represents, and then when they think about what a legal system actually is. Again, this won't be very long. There won't be very many videos on that topic. Just like with the history of the English legal system, I also have a series of videos that I've done that I did, I think, 2 years ago on jurisprudence. So that's the kind of philosophy of law and legal theory, if you want to have a look at that over on the channel. From there, we will get into the actual substantive topics themselves, beginning with looking at the idea of the court system, talking about the nature of the judiciary, talking about court hierarchy, talking about the appeals system, as well as rights of audience. So we will talk about the judicial branch of government in quite a lot of detail and think about how that works and the sort of institutional structures that we find there. We will then talk about the doctrine of case law, the idea of the common law, the principles of precedence, the delineation between the ratio of a case and the obiter of a case, what these things actually mean, and what the important part of a case actually is. Before thinking about legislation fundamentally, thinking about primary legislation, acts of Parliament, acts of the Welsh Assembly as well, thinking about statutory interpretation, and really bringing in some of the understanding that we have from our constitutional law videos as well. Notice that these are kind of similar to constitutional law, or at least some of constitutional law, in the sense that we're talking about the institutional structures of government. And that is the case because, of course, when you study the Constitution of the United Kingdom, you are studying the Constitution in a way that involves an understanding of institutions and relationships and principles that these institutions hold. Whereas this is more a study of what the legal system is, how the legal system actually works. A very fundamental introduction to law kind of series. In terms of citations and further reading, like with all of these other videos, if there are any additional citations per video, I'll put them in at the end of these as well. So things like cases, because you're not necessarily required to have any detailed knowledge of cases, except for those that, of course, are very, very important. There are a number of different textbooks and citations and sources. If you want to play it safe, of course, then there is the University of Law SQE legal system textbook. You also have other revision guides that are specifically focused on the SQE specification. If you want to dive a little bit deeper and you just want to have a broader understanding of the English legal system, then the first two sources are general textbooks on the English legal system, which will give you a much broader interpretation that is not just limited to the SQE. So if you want to, then they're available for you as well. As with all of these videos, the first 5 will be available for free for people to get an idea of the kinds of content that there's going to be made. And then from there, they'll be behind the SQE membership level, just like with all of the other videos. And also, as soon as we have completed all of these videos, I'm going to go back over this specification and go through some exam questions. So basically formulate some exam questions, formulate some practice style questions. So not only you get an understanding of the content, the actual substantive content from a sort of revision perspective, but you'll also have some opportunity to engage with some exam questions, which is of course the most important thing. So I hope everybody's enjoyed this video, and I hope to see everybody in the next lesson when we start looking at some of the theoretical aspects of law. We'll ask the question, what actually is law? And then we will start diving into some of the historical origins of the English legal system before moving on to the substantive topics specifically concerning the judiciary.